Our lives are laid out on a road of bumps, turns, struggles, and more. How do we respond? How do we endure adversity for learning and growth? I'm Aubrey Johnson, and we'll explore these questions and more on the Road to Rediscovery. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Road to Rediscovery. I'm your host, Aubrey Johnson. The Road to Rediscovery is about reflecting on life lessons to learn and grow from them, and of course, pay it forward and level up those around you. Help them struggle, or help them who are struggling through tough times with lessons you've learned from your journey. Just a quick reminder that you can hear this show anywhere you get your podcasts. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, we invite you to leave a rate and review. Otherwise, we still love your feedback if you just shoot us an email at roadtorediscoverypodcast@gmail.com. That's roadtorediscoverypodcast@gmail.com, and we'll give you a shout out in a future episode, and who knows, we may even slide over a little swag for you. All right. My special guest is a retired U.S. Army veteran serving our country for 22 years. He's also the co-founder of Life-Changing Wisdom Coach and the co-author of the Demi Divine book series. Through lessons learned on his journey, he's helping others turn their traumas into treasures and find meaning in their story with the purpose of creating meaningful change. We're going to dig into all this. Can't wait for this conversation. Let's meet Mr. Asher Wright to the show. Asher, welcome to the show, man. It's so great to have you here.
You got this thing on setup, brother. Oh my God. I love this. This is awesome. I'm watching you flexing, moving your flex right now, man. This is great. This is great.
Oh, thank you, man. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, you got the whole crowd cheering for you, man. We've been waiting for this conversation for some time.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's been a while. We set it up for a long time. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So first off, Asher, I want to thank you for your service. Okay. I think we've talked in our preliminary chat a while ago that, I'm not a veteran, but I am a military brat. Both my parents served. And so, just like most people, those who serve in the military and their families have a special place in my heart. And it takes a special person to make that commitment, for something, to contribute to something larger and greater than themselves, all in the purpose of protecting others' freedom. So again, thank you for your service, sir. I appreciate that.
Brother, the American population, I say they worth my sacrifice. They're worth it. You guys are worth it. So that's why we do it.
Well, thank you, sir. I'm very grateful, very grateful. Now, look, before we get into this meat and potatoes, okay, of this conversation, all right, I got to ask you now, you were 18 when your family relocated from Jamaica to the United States. Is that correct?
Yes, 18, almost 19. Yeah.
18, almost 19. Okay, so that means the first 17 years of your life, you've never seen snow.
No, man. I guess what?
No.
When I first figure out how to enjoy it, I can't wait for winter now. I love it.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
So what got you intrigued with snowboarding and having an interest in snowboarding after 17 years of never seeing snow?
Wow. Here's a story really quick.
Okay.
It was a thing. One of my girlfriend at the time was like, let's go snowboarding, because she did snowboarding. She was like, Ashley, you should try snowboarding.
Yeah.
But here's the crazy thing, because I've been in the military. I didn't like the snow.
Right.
Because in the military we dressed kind of a certain way so we don't overheat. So you're gonna feel a cold. I was like, man,
yes, you were.
So it was training out there, and he kind of sucked a little bit. I'm like, man, I don't like the snow. But once I started snowboarding, and I figured out how to dress for the snow, and I started having fun and playing in the snow. Now winter is fun for me. So I don't resent winter anymore. I love winter because each one of the seasons I kind of have some kind of hobby that I enjoy during the season. So either it's summer, spring, whatever, or you know what I'm saying? I have an enjoyment for it. So I look towards those seasons with a lot of enthusiasm. I look for the winter. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful, man. That's wonderful. So you have a very unique way of reframing the narrative, right?
Yes.
Yeah. That changes your outlook and perspective on whatever it may be, whether it's a season or whether it's an event or whether it's an activity. So I feel that energy in how you explain that. So I hope I
Mm.
was accurate or
Oh
close.
yes, 100%. You gotta find something fun to do
Yeah,
when things didn't seem so great, and you're gonna like, okay, you know what? I can exist here. I
yeah,
can exist
yeah.
here. Yeah.
Yeah. So, man, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. I was just intrigued by that, and I had to throw that out there first. So, Asher, we're going to have some conversations here and some discussions regarding stories. Okay,
Mm.
our stories and what they are, what they mean, and more. Right. But to start us off, um, I've read that you've written that over 2 decades of serving your country,
Mm.
you have completed what some would identify as a chapter in your life, but you would rather call it a series of Netflix movies. Can you kind of help us unpack and explain kind of what you mean there?
Well, series of Netflix movie. I was trying to frame it so people can understand it, because oftentimes when I speak, I
Hmm.
mean, you can notice when most people speak, we kind of use what I call spam. It's like similes, parables, and analogies, metaphors. So I like the metaphor stuff, like
Hmm.
expand
Hmm.
stuff out. So kind of use
Hmm.
things to explain things. So the military experience, I call it like a net because I had Netflix here because I had a lot of stuff I went through in the military. Some
Yeah,
of it, some of it, I was not able to transfer over to the civilian side, but a
yeah.
lot of those skill set kind of stayed with me.
Hmm.
And the
Hmm.
military was one of the best decision I made when I moved to the United States. Like
Hmm.
100% best decision I made, and it
Oh
took me
man,
to a lot of places around the world, seen a lot of things. I went to a
yeah.
lot of countries and have a lot of challenges that helped me figure out exactly what my purpose on in life is supposed to be. I
Right,
discovered that while I was in the military. So the military was a place that I got a lot of gratitude to, because it helped me see the world a lot differently, a
right,
whole lot
right.
different.
I see. I see. Nice, nice. Well, that makes sense then. And when you say that you collect stories and circulate life-changing wisdom, are you referring to the stories in? I think you mentioned something about 100 books a year challenge that
Mm.
you've been going through. Are those stories collected from that, or as part of the client stories when you help them find their purpose and meaning, or is it a combination of both?
Oh, combination. So here's the
It
thing.
is. Okay.
So growing up, I used to always, I grew up in Jamaica, so I used to love
Mhm.
listening to Rastafari, and they used to tell a lot of stories
Yeah.
about life. And then I
Yeah.
used to have those people that used to go to farm works, like in like England, in America,
Hmm.
and Canada, so forth and so on. They used to
Hmm.
come back and tell a whole lot of stories about life, about this, how they see the world.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
as a child, I was always fascinated by what's out there in the world, because I can only imagine. I was on this island. Not a lot of people leave it. Those that
Right.
left leave come back with a bunch of stories. So I was always a dream about what life's gonna provide me when I get out there. So when I moved to
Love
the
it.
United States, joined the
Hmm.
military, I was like, I got to the United
Hmm.
States, I'm like, I gotta see the world.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
4 months after I got to the United States, I signed up for the military. 8 months
Mm.
later, I was in training. So I was ready to go see the world. I was like, I got to Connecticut, where I'm at right now, actually visit my parents. I was like, oh
Yeah.
man, this is not like what I like, grew up in Jamaica with. I grew
Yeah.
up in the mountains of Jamaica. I
Hmm.
love to see the outdoors. I didn't see it a
Hmm.
lot in Connecticut. So I went to see the world. So now
Yeah.
when we say collect stories and circulate life changing wisdom,
Hmm.
I'm always interested in what people's stories. And even
Hmm.
on my podcast, like one of my initial question is like, what is people big question? What is that big question they have for life? And they
Yeah.
think about before they go to bed at night, when they wake up in the morning, what is that big question? I'm always curious about it, because
Yeah.
this says a lot about what that person's story is about, because you get to
Hmm.
find out now what is driving them. So I'm
Hmm.
always collecting stories, and the books that I set this challenge back in 2016
Yeah.
to read and listen to 100 books a year and 1,000 books in 10 years.
Wow.
And I'm searching for stories because I love to hear stories from people. So now
Yeah.
I'm on my 7th year, almost 700 books closing out. So that
Amazing.
challenge has helped me to really connect to a lot of stories out there, because here is something that I had that was a real challenge in my life. Like
Hmm.
I had dyslexia and I had
Hmm.
ADD. Those symptoms was very prevalent in my life.
Oh my.
So now I was curious about who else is struggling with the same thing I'm struggling,
Yeah.
and who has mastered it, figured out how to live with it and be successful. And the only way to
Right.
find that is to listen to other people's story. So I'm
Hmm.
always wanting to see who has mastered my disability, my disorders, and made
Yeah.
themselves great. And through books, that's when I was able to discover that. So now
I see.
I'm always out there hunting for stories, man. Hunting for stories to
I
help my life.
see. I see. Man, fascinating. Fascinating.
Yeah.
And so what is some of the data from the stories that you either
Here's
collect?
the beauty about that question.
Yeah,
Even when you think about all this artificial intelligence that's collecting data,
yeah,
like data never tells a story. You're gonna
okay,
need a human being to do it. Like we are story makers.
hmm,
So you was like, what's the data? So I like to go in when I'm always looking for like tools,
yeah,
like systems, belief systems. I look for what I
hmm,
call, I mentioned earlier, the spam, the similes, parables, analogies, metaphor that people use to really
yep,
like frame their stuff. Because what I noticed
yeah,
that when we have a conversation, like right now, we're not really actually talking about the thing, right? We always use something else to explain the thing we're actually talking about. So we're never really actually talking about the things. And I realized that people use a lot of metaphors, a lot of analogies, a lot of similes or parables to explain things.
yeah,
So I gotta get better. I gotta get good at this. Because the wise folks that are explaining situation to me, they use those kind of tools.
hmm,
Because
hmm.
all it does is just take a big body of information, simplify it down to a small capsule, and I deliver it to you. So you can kind of fit your story into it. So I'm looking for tools and systems that people are using to make their life successful. How can I fit my story into those tools to make my life more simple? So that's what
Understood.
I do when I hunt for, like, I collect stories. I'm looking for those
Yes,
things in other
yes.
people's journey.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Tools and systems. And we're going to kind of segue into my next question. And I
Hmm.
think this is a tool or a system. Maybe if you can kind of break this down for the listeners as well, Asher. Um, Tell us about the ego, the ego mindset.
So I think ego is an acronym. It stands for
Hmm,
equal Gus objective. And I
hmm,
hope I don't confuse your audience. I'm trying to explain this because this gonna go back a little bit.
hmm.
I think ego gets a bad name because that's, I think, the way people look at it. So if you chase your lineage all the way back, you're gonna end up with to what I call God Universe Source. It's another acronym. I like to make a lot of acronyms. You're gonna notice it about me. I make a lot of acronyms because
Yeah,
it's a way for me to remember things. And in the military, we do a lot of that stuff too. We kind of use acronym to remember long stuff, like stuff that okay,
yeah.
we create. So
Like
God
your
Universe Source.
AREs,
Say again.
like your AREs, right? Don't forget your AREs.
Yeah, yes, yes. So God Universe Source is an acronym. So a lot of people use God,
Okay.
some use Universe, some use Source. Depends on your spiritual journey, right?
Yeah.
So if you trace your lineage all the way back, you get to God Universe Source. So God gave birth to the first being, gave birth to himself to the first being. Like your grandparents gave birth to themselves when they gave birth to you, right? So forth and so on. So I look at my lineage that way. So now how I see myself in the world, I see myself as an expression of God Universe Source. And now through me, I create what I call my ego. My
Hmm,
ego is my expression,
hmm, hmm,
right? So if
hmm.
anything that comes after the word I am is your ego. So your name is your first ego. Your parents gave it to you, or
Hmm.
somebody that kind of care for you.
Right.
Then you might have another ego where your close friends might call your nickname. It's another ego, right? So you can live up to it. So I realized that anything that comes off the word I am is my ego.
Right.
So now I'm creating my ego.
Hmm,
So based on that breakdown, I look at my world that way. So now I do my work to my ego. So right now I'm an author. That's my new
hmm.
ego. When I first created it, totally I didn't feel like I was good enough for it.
Mm,
Right?
hmm.
I had to study my way into it. Right? When
Yeah.
I said I
Yeah.
was gonna be a life coach, automatically I was like, that's my new ego. But I didn't feel like I was good enough for it either. I had to
Mm,
educate my way into it. So all of
hmm.
these things we create in life is our ego. Sometimes people are happy with the expression of themselves, which is their ego. So they're like, oh, that's my it's the ego thing, right? No, you created it. You gotta take responsibility for it. Just
Yeah.
like God expressed itself through you, you express itself through your ego.
Right.
So that's
I
why I look
see.
at life in a certain way, if that makes any sense.
No, no, that does make sense. And I just want to make sure that I'm clear. Um, ego does get a bad, or
A bad rap.
it gets a bad rap, and from a society standpoint, it has a bad connotation to it. Someone who's conceited, someone
Mm,
who's pompous, someone who is pretentious, maybe,
mm,
and someone who's self-centered. But this ego that you're talking about, in what you define as yourself,
mhm,
it sounds like you're doing this and being and holding yourself accountable for it and taking responsibility for it. So it's not to brag to the world, but
mhm,
it's to tell yourself who you are, what you are, and hold yourself accountable for doing the work to be what you say you are. There's some purpose behind behind this EGO mindset. Is that's what it sounds
Yes,
like to me? Is that accurate or?
it, that's accurate. So, hmm, ego. Let me kind of break it down this way.
Okay.
Are you a person that go to church?
Yes.
You go to church? So I went to church this Sunday with my mom because my mom go to church. She
Hmm.
invited me. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna go hang with her because I came here to hang out with my parents, get some time
Yeah.
with her. You go to
Yeah.
church, let me go spend some time with her at church.
Hmm.
But I'm normally not a person that go to church. But I was sitting there just processing what's happening around me, and I asked myself, why do people go to church? And this was showed up for me. People go to church to meet their maker, right? People go to
Hmm.
church to understand their maker, learn about their maker.
Hmm.
But then the more you learn about the maker, the more you learn about yourself.
Hmm. Yes.
Because you are the maker. They said the maker is in you. What that makes you? The maker. So if you are the maker, that means you're responsible for everything that happens in your life
Mm.
because you're making it real.
Yes.
When I think about that process, this is one of the reasons why people go to church because they go to church to learn about their maker. And the more you learn about your maker, the more you learn about yourself
Right.
because you and your maker are one.
There's no arrogance in that.
There's no so
No.
no, yeah. So I'm saying that so now we gotta think about life this way. Like if you are making everything about your life the way it is, then that
Mhm.
means you're fully 100% responsible for everything. So now I
Yes.
see myself that way. Everything that happens in my life, I'm responsible for it.
Right.
Nobody else.
Right.
So now when I
No.
think about my ego, it's the same thing.
Hmm.
So some people say the ego did it. Well, no, you and the ego are one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? You can't separate yourself from your ego. You created it, right?
Yeah.
You define what it is, right? Because you can't define yourself. You can only define the thing you create. So the thing you create is your ego, right? So I
Yeah.
look
I
at it the
got you.
same way. If that make any sense.
No, that does make sense. Yeah, yeah. You can't throw your ego under the bus and just say, oh, well, that's not me. That's my ego.
Mm, mm,
Well, no, well, if you're throwing your ego under the bus, you're throwing yourself under the bus,
uh-huh.
and yeah, because you and your ego are one, and
Yes.
yeah, and so I really appreciate how you broke that down, Asher, and furthermore, I appreciate how you have uh, given that fresh perspective on
Mm,
EGO, on ego mindset. Okay,
mm-hmm,
that takes away the stigma
mm-hmm,
of arrogance and that sort of thing. So and puts forth a mindset of responsibility, accountability, right?
and
To
empowerment. Mm-hmm,
and empowerment. 100%, man. 100%. So when it comes to the stories, you
mm-hmm,
mentioned something about different angles of the same story. How does one explore different angles of the same story of, let's say, their story, right? What does it
mm-hmm.
take to see multiple perspectives of your own story, you know?
Hmm. Good question, my brother. This is something that I've been working on, helping a lot of people do.
Hmm. Hmm.
And what I use, because what I use is like a cube, right? Everybody understand what a cube is.
Yes.
And say if a cube is your story,
Hmm.
so whatever story happens for you, it's your story.
Yeah.
Now, all you gotta do is switch your position on your story.
Hmm. Hmm.
So if you look to a cube, you might think it's the same thing, right, from different angle,
Yeah.
or you might think it's different from different angle, but it's the
Right.
same cube. It's the same view, same shape, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it looks a little different from different angle. So what
Hmm.
I'm saying is, if you got a story that when you first experience it, you awfulize it, right? You make it look like the worst trauma in the world.
Yeah.
Well, that story happened. Now you carrying that story with you, but when you first interpret it, when you first label it, they give it an awful label because based on your understanding, your language of the world.
Yes.
So I'm saying go back and look at your story and shift your angle on it, and you're gonna see it a little differently. And that's what we've been doing.
Mm.
Matter of fact, on the book Turning Traumas into Treasure, I wrote a little poem on the back of it. I mean, they can look
Hmm.
it up. If you look it up online, they can see it. But it's
Okay.
it's what I had. I create a word about failure treasure, right? And
Hmm.
it's go from top to bottom. It's like a very disempowering story
Yeah.
if you read it from top to bottom. But when you
Okay.
read in reverse words,
Hmm.
right, from bottom to top, it's an empowering story. It's very unique. But it's
Wow.
the same words, just from a different angle.
Yeah.
So same thing with the story. The way you look at it right now, you might see it as awful, but when you switch the angle, get somebody
Yeah.
to say, "Hey, move your chair and sit
Yeah.
right here and look at your story a little different." You're
Yeah.
gonna see it a little different way because
Yeah.
based on how you see the world, is how you interpret the story. If you see the world as a dangerous place, most likely you're gonna see a lot of danger, even in your own story. you're gonna
Yeah.
see the danger in it. You won't see the
Yeah.
beauty in it because you don't see the world as a beautiful place. So it depends on how you see the world. Same way you see a
Uh,
story. So I ask people,
understood.
what kind of world do you think the world is? Is it a dangerous place, an awful place, an ugly place, or a beautiful place? Depends on the answer. Their story, they're gonna see a lot in their own story, a lot of danger. Because I
Yeah.
remember
Yeah.
when I was deployed and I came back from Afghanistan, and when I was over there, you can on real high alert, right? That means you're looking for
Hmm.
danger everywhere. So I
Yeah.
get back home, I was like, why am I looking for IED in every corner? I'm checking
Yeah.
my like I'm just looking for danger everywhere. I'm like, why am I doing this? I'm home and I'm in a safe place. Why am I still doing it?
Right.
Because I'm still looking for danger. Well, I've been noticing things that wasn't even dangerous, but I'm seeing it.
Hmm.
So like,
Hmm.
actually, you gotta change the way you look at life. Like I'm home. I'm in a safe place. Let me
Yeah.
look for safety in the world,
Right.
and I start seeing it. I gotta erase that mindset of being on defense all the time. So I understand some people are in a place that's very, very tough, very rough, and they gotta look for
Yeah.
those danger because it's there. But when
Yeah.
you're not there, you gotta change the way you see the world so you can see what else is in the world, what else is in your story. Same thing, same thing.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Asher. In fact, my background is talent development, so
Mm,
I work with the development of executives, and so there's a term that we sometimes use, um, saying that we have to unlearn certain
mm,
things,
mm,
that hold us back. Things that we have been a part of our growing up, whether it's in our personal lives or professional lives. Maybe there's an old school method of leadership or an old school method of how you what you expect as a leader from your subordinates, and your muscle memory
mm,
goes to that. And these days, with this generation in this job market, for instance, there's a new way of leadership. It's called servant leadership, right? And
mm,
so
mm,
these old school leaders have to kind of unlearn the traditional method that was expected of a leader, say back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, and
mhm,
so forth, and unlearn that to learn the new way of
mhm,
leadership so they can continue to be an effective leader with today's generation. So
mm,
that's what I picked up from what you were saying. Having to that dangerous mindset, right?
mm,
Having to kind of reset that way of thinking now that you're not in a dangerous environment, you're at home,
mhm,
and reset that way of thinking by looking from a different angle and saying, hey, I am in a safe place. There
mhm,
is no IED around the corner,
mhm,
and so forth. So I appreciate you breaking that down, man. Now, Asher, I know you work with a lot of different clients and a lot of different people. Okay, um, but I gotta know this, man.
mhm,
There's a significant, just in the brief moments that you and I have been talking. Okay, there is a significant level
mm,
of depth that you reveal, or it seems like you reveal with the clients that you work with. While I believe everyone on this earth is capable to think and feel and sense ourselves at a deeper level, um, it doesn't come natural for a lot of us, right? I
mhm.
don't think it does. So, how do you get your clients, those who don't have that type of mindset initially, how do you get their mindset in that space, where they can allow themselves to think deeper and have more introspection of themselves?
Hmm. I'm gonna start with this because of what we left off the last one we just started. So one of my favorite quotes from Dan Sullivan about the
Mhm.
reprogramming your brain, right? It
Yeah.
says your eyes only see and your ears only hear what your brain is looking for.
Mm.
So we gotta do a
Wow.
lot of reprogramming. So when people are thinking about how they see the world,
Hmm.
they gotta think about reprogramming. Like I had
Hmm.
to do a lot of that for myself because
Hmm.
when I told you that I had ADD and dyslexia,
Yeah.
right? It's a challenge, right?
Hmm.
So how I see the world was I learned stuff the hard way because I was going through a system based on my learning disability. It
Hmm.
didn't work for me. So that created a lot of trauma for myself. So then we
Hmm.
asked a question about people that are like how you get them to switch their mindset. It's reprogramming.
Yeah.
Like you gotta start creating new language for yourself.
Hmm.
Read
Hmm.
new language to describe reality. So if you tell me a story, I'm like, okay, look at your story. Tell me what is good about your story.
Hmm.
and tell me what not so good about your story. And sometimes people have a difficult time tell you what is not good about their story.
Yeah.
Or what is good. It depends on their mindset. So for example, so this is something I always ask people, like when I meet them, I'm like, hey, if I can work with you right now, just write down 10 things that is not right about your life. Like for your audience right now, just write down 10 things that is not right about your life.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can list those 10 things, then you can start figure out what you're gonna work on now. Because those things you can take action on. So you figure out this is not right about my life. What can I do about it?
Yeah.
Then we can start working on it. But you
I
gotta know
see.
what's not right.
Yeah.
What you see in life that's not right. Because sometimes you might look at it based on some trauma lens that happened in your past,
Right.
and then there's real jewels in that thing. You just it's not looking at it properly. So I
Yeah.
help them see the jewel in that stuff. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Thank you for breaking that down. And you can find the treasure
Mm,
in what you've empowered and asked your clients to do, and the listeners. Those of you listening, I hope you've wrote down 10 things that
that
are
is not right about your life.
that's not right about your life,
Yes.
challenges in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that's awesome. That's great. So turning those things that are not right in your life and
Mm-hmm.
flipping the script to be successful. I think you see where I'm going with this. Wanting to understand the 5C complex for
Mm-hmm.
success. Okay, turning those failures or turning those struggles into successes. Can you break down for us this 5C complex for success?
So this is something that if you're a person that do a lot of writing like I do, because I
Mm-hmm.
do a lot of writing. My goal is to write 86 books on 86th birthday.
Mm-hmm.
That's 43 years to do 83 more books, right?
Wow. Yeah.
83 more books. So I learned this thing. I was listening to, if you anybody familiar with John C. Maxwell,
Mm-hmm.
I was listening to him talking about how he organized his notes when he's listening to reading books, listening to books to kind of create these new books and so forth and so
Yeah.
on. He read a lot
Yeah.
of books. And
Mm-hmm.
he was like, he kind of packaged them in different folders and so forth and so on. I'm listening to him talk.
Yeah.
And then I was listening to Dan Sullivan, which is another guy that I really love.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, what he do to help himself when he's trying to write is he he writes what Shakespeare write, because Shakespeare used like 1 and 2 syllable words.
Okay.
So he makes stuff very simple.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he practiced writing those things, and little by little, he kind of trained his brain to kind of write like how Shakespeare write. So I listened to him talking about how they write. I'm like, okay, I listen to these guys' system
Yeah.
of how they organize this stuff. So then I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so now what I do is I go out in the world. So the first C is I collect a lot of data, just like these guys do. They collect a lot of data from people that they admire,
Yeah.
right? I collect a lot of data. Then I copy from that data what resonate with me,
Yes.
right? Some people don't believe in copying because like you copying me. Some people say, stop copying me, right? And sometimes I get a negative way of looking at stuff, but I'm like, no,
Yeah.
no, no.
Yeah.
Like we are notorious for copying. Like the
Mm-hmm.
baby in you never dies. Like the reason why we dominate the planet because we're great copiers.
Yes.
So I copy other people's things, and I extract from it the things that resonate with me,
Yes.
and then I use what I copied to create something of my own.
Okay.
And then when I create something of my own, that gives me a little bit more clarity of my direction I'm going in life.
Mm-hmm.
Because the
Mm-hmm.
more you can create for yourself, the more clarity you get in life. Because just like I'm writing here, the more I write, the more I clarify my thoughts. Like I organize my thinking a lot more.
Yes. Yes.
So once I
Yes.
so once I get that clarity,
Mm-hmm.
then I celebrate. So that's the 5 C. You know, I don't forget to celebrate. I gotta celebrate my wins, like my gains. I gotta celebrate my
Got to
profit.
celebrate. Got
Yeah.
to
So those are the
celebrate.
5 C concept that I use when I'm approaching. I'm collecting a lot of stories.
Mm-hmm.
I'm capturing people data. So I study people's stuff. Just like a chef, I practice other chef recipe until I'm good at it,
Mm-hmm.
so I can create my own recipe, right? But you gotta
Yeah.
go and collect that stuff. So the 5 C complex does that for me. So use that for anything else you do in life.
Man, that's
If that makes any
beautiful.
sense.
Yeah, that does. It makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's beautiful. Not only does each of the 5C complex carries a significant virtue.
Mm,
Okay, but I love the sequence that it's in. The way you
mm,
explained it, the order that you've gone in, starting with collecting and finishing with celebrating, right?
mm,
Celebrating that success, celebrating that win. We owe it to ourselves to celebrate, right? And
mm,
and not to stay complacent, obviously, but take that time to celebrate. You've worked for it, and then grow and move from there for sure. So Asher, give us clue us in on the Demi Divine book series and what that series consists of.
Hmm. Before I answer that question, I'm gonna let the audience know. So
Yeah.
we talked about a lot of different tools, a lot of different concepts. So I hope it didn't overwhelm you. So, but a lot of these things are like these are tools and systems that are designed for you to fit your story into them because that's what we do in life. We're searching for tools and systems so we can fit our own story into them. And a lot of times
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna need help fitting your story into those tools. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes some people have been practicing those tools longer than you, and they
Mm-hmm.
can help you fit your story into it. Because once you figure out how to fit your story into those tools, that's when life becomes a little bit easier.
Yes.
So the Demi
Yes.
Divine book series, I was thinking about that name itself, right? And it's like it's like Demi Divine is like you can say call it a demigod, right?
Yeah.
So how I have this book series set up is where um I break it down into four pillars: mental intercourse, spiritual intercourse, physical intercourse, and social intercourse. Those are the pillars all my books around.
Okay.
And how I have it structured is with the first two book I put out is on a mental intercourse. Now I'm working on one that's gonna be on physical intercourse. So mental intercourse is how you communicate a deeper experience of reality with other people. It's a communication process of your reality with other people. That's the mental thing. And I
Yeah.
know sometimes people hear the word intercourse, they might think in a different way, right? But intercourse means connection,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Connection.
sometimes
Yeah.
you can like mind fuck yourself. Can I curse
Well,
in
you can. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
You're fine.
yeah.
Mhm.
Sometimes some stuff you experience kind of like mind fuck. You're like, oh my god,
Yeah.
I didn't thought about it like that. So
Right. Right.
I expect my content sometimes to like mind fuck people. Like, man, I didn't thought
Yeah.
about it that way. That's what I'm going after. So I'm going after ways to reframe certain things. Like, oh, I didn't thought about it that way. Yes. So here's another way to
Hmm.
think about it, because
Hmm.
everything
Hmm.
we do on the planet, right? Somebody made it up
Yep.
in some way. So all we gotta do is either we reframe it, reprogram it, do something to it that makes sense for us. So
Yes.
when I think about Demi Divine is when I want to combine all of those aspects of life, the
Hmm.
physical, social, and spiritual and
Hmm.
mental piece, and kind of write content to rather kind of bring people into fit them their story into their system, those tools. So that's what I'm working with the Demi Divine series.
Gotcha.
All
100%.
personal development.
All personal development. Yes, yes, and great tools, great tools. And I also want to thank you for clarifying for the listeners. Okay, and I want to help that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we've talked through a lot of tools and probably just barely scratched the surface
Mm-hmm.
of what of what Asher has to offer in his services. Okay, and in his work, but just to give the listeners a taste of some of these tools and what they are and what benefits one can achieve from these tools
Mm-hmm.
under the careful guidance of someone who has practiced these tools, you know,
Mm-hmm.
for a significantly longer time
Mm-hmm.
so that we are on the right path for whatever transformation we're looking for
Mm-hmm.
whatever meaning and purpose that we're looking for ourselves in this life. Right? You want someone with that experience to guide you through using these tools, and we just wanted to give you a preview of what some of these tools are for the listeners, and we are going to make sure that we throw in the show notes information on how you can contact Asher to
Mm-hmm.
get more information on these tools. And
Uh,
speaking of tools, I would like to also talk about NFV
okay.
formulas.
Mm. Another
How,
tool.
yeah, another tool. How does these formulas contribute to your personal growth, man?
Mm. Before I tap into NFV, I'm just going to explain something on tool piece a little bit,
Yeah.
because I want people to think about the idea of a tool, right? So somebody want to build a house.
Hmm.
You want to build a house, but before you build this house, first you got to think about what kind of tools you're going to need to build this house.
Yes.
And then even take it back a little further. You got to think about what kind of mindset you're going to use to build these tools to build a house.
Yes.
So you got so it takes a lot of depth into when you think about certain things in life. Like
Hmm.
you got to think about the tool, the mindset they use to build the tools, to build the tools to build a house, right? So
Yes.
there's a lot of tools. So it goes all the way back. It goes pretty deep. So you got to think about those things. It takes a lot of genius to think about. Okay, before you build
Yeah.
this house, like I need to figure out what kind of tools.
Right. Right.
That means you got to think about building those tools,
Yeah.
and then you got to think about building the tools to build those tools, right? And the
That's right.
mindset you're gonna take to build those. So it's all about that depth. You got to think about life in a lot more deeper way,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it takes a lot of work to get to where you're at. So now you got to think about building your life. like your house. You got to think about what kind of mindset you're going to use to build your life. So now
Yeah.
think about the NFV. I learned this NFV formula from my coach. He's a speaking coach. He was like, Asher, like before I even give a public speak to any organization, I'm following this process. He was like, I asked the organization, what is the needs of the audience? Like, what are their needs? What do
Yeah.
they need to know about this content I'm going to share, right? So he focused on that stuff. And he's
Yeah.
like, okay, what kind of fear these audience might have?
Yeah.
What is keeping them up at night?
Yeah.
What's worrying them? Like, okay,
Yeah.
cool. Same thing. Like victories. What kind of victories? What kind of achievement do they have that I can reinforce? So I
Yeah.
think about the same thing in my life. Like other people I'm coaching. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what is your need? What is the thing that you need to do that you're not doing?
Yeah.
What is the fear? What is the thing that's you fear about the thing that you need to do?
Yeah.
And when people start breaking down, like, oh my God, yeah, these are the things I fear. So based on if you know your needs, fears, and victories, life becomes easier because you can
Mm.
reinforce the victory, work on it a little bit more because you can see more of it in the world. The
Yeah.
things that you fear, you lay it out. These are things that I fear. Somebody that feared that thing already overcame it. What did they do?
Right.
But
Right.
when you know those things, you can work on them. But a lot of people don't know. They're not
Wow.
thinking. So you fit your story into these tools, and automatically
Yeah.
life becomes easier because now you can say, these are my needs, these are my
Mm-hmm.
fears, these are my
Mm-hmm.
victories. I put them on the table. I'm like, hold on, great. I know somebody that can fix your fear. These are your needs. I can hold you accountable. These are your victories. Let's reinforce these things. Let's see more of them show up in your life, and
Right.
people start making progress because now you can see these things. So these tools work, man.
Wow. Sounds almost like they help you build a roadmap,
Ah, pave
for
a few more miles on the road, my brother.
yeah, a few more
Yeah.
miles on the road. Yeah. Pave a few more miles, but it's moving in the right direction
Yes.
to
Mm-hmm.
where you want to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Love it. Love it, man. So, Asher, how can the listeners connect with you, learn more about the great work that you're doing, and maybe even pick up a copy of the book series?
Yes. www.lifechangingwisdom.com. That's where I do my coaching on my coaching platform.
Okay.
And www.demidivine.com. That's where I'm housing all the books. I mean, you can get all the books on Amazon. They're out there.
Okay.
And that's two places. I'm on Instagram, asher.ra.ststa.
Hmm.
You can find me there. I'm on Facebook, but my Facebook account is Maxwell. So you gotta just go like the page a little bit. But
Yeah.
but definitely Instagram is the best way to hit me up if you want to do social media because
Mhm.
I can kind of follow you. You can follow me. There's no limit on Instagram, but Facebook got a
Yeah.
limit. But those are the
Fan-
platforms, brother.
Oh, wonderful. Fantastic. Okay. We're going to make sure and have all the links to the book, the links to Life Coach Wisdom. We're going to have all the links to your social media handles, specifically Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
and also a link to your Facebook page so that the listeners can like it.
Mm-hmm.
And I want the listeners to uh, click those links, go to that website, learn about the great work that Asher's doing while listening to this wonderful conversation
Mm-hmm.
that Asher and I have had touching on these tools, and then reach out, contact Asher,
Mm-hmm.
and say, "Hey, man, I read a little bit about this tool on your website." While listening to you explain a little bit about the tool to Aubrey on the show, tell me more, right? Tell me
Mm-hmm.
more.
Oh,
Yeah.
appreciate it, brother. Appreciate it, man. Definitely appreciate that. Just hit me up.
Yeah.
Yeah, hit
No,
me up.
absolutely. Hit them up, guys. Asher
I'm
Wright,
a
man.
tool maker, brother. I'm a tool maker.
You a tool maker. Yes, you are. Yep, yep. And we need tools to get our job done or get our work done, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when you have the right tool, you can achieve many things. So,
Mm-hmm.
and Asher has just the formula for the right tools for meaning in your life. Asher Wright, man, thank you so much for coming on this show. I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope we can stay in touch, and your next breakthrough that you have, I'd love for you to come back on the road to rediscovery, and let's help celebrate and share that message of that next great accomplishment, brother.
I will. I certainly will, brother. Make it an awesome day too, man.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. And I want to thank all of you for tuning in and listening. And look, if you have a loved one, a neighbor, a friend, a relative, just someone who doesn't seem to be themselves, maybe they're going through some dark days of despair and not quite sure where to turn or who to turn to, I humbly ask that you please share this show with them, because on the road to rediscovery, we want our listeners to know two things. Number one, you're not alone. And number two, there's always hope.
Hmm.
The road to rediscovery, it's a movement, a revolution. And guess what? You are now part of it. We're all roadies on this journey of life. And it sure feels good having you on the road with me. Thanks again for listening. We'll chat again soon. We really hope you enjoyed this episode of The Road to Rediscovery. We'd love to hear from you. Shoot us an email at roadtorediscoverypodcast@gmail.com and leave us any questions or comments you may have.